one person watching. Oh, you've gone. Maybe it was me watching myself. Never mind. What I'm trying to say is what I said in a space with Vincent earlier, but I've deleted that space because of sound issues that made me sound like I was in an echo chamber. But what I'm trying to say is that Judaism is not an organized religion. Some of you may have heard of organized religions. What are they exactly, and why does it matter? Well, the way of working out why organized religion is better than the Eastern religions is just because the Eastern religions do not require Hindus and Buddhists to swear an oath of allegiance or anything of the sort. In fact, it's all rather disorganized. And you may say this is exactly how you want things to be. You don't want to be rounded up and told exactly what you must believe and what you must and mustn't do. And this is commonly associated to be the problem with Islam and Christianity and Judaism, in that the rules are so strict. People who call themselves Jews had to believe in them, and then they would argue with each other about what is the correct way to believe, and then end up killing each other in their European wars of religion and other wars that have made them so warlike. So obviously the origins of organized religion has to be considered. The trade-off is obvious. If you want to be a Hindu or a Buddhist, nobody's stopping you, but they are not religions of any status. People don't respect Hindus or Muslims. They are low-status religions, and the high-status religions are, of course, the Abrahamic religions. And there is fierce competition within the three religious groups to have the ascendancy over the others. So I guess Jews would be saying we are the original and the best, and the Christians would say we have acquired three global empires, and Muslims will say that even if they have not acquired three global empires, they at least have not started two world wars. And in any case, when the third Christian empire collapses, Islam would fill the moral vacuum. And who is to say that these things shall not come to pass? So what makes organized religion so powerful? Obviously, it is their organized nature, in that it forces Christians to be baptized and then confirmed, and Jews to be circumcised and then given their bar mitzvah, and for Muslims to obey the laws of God in the Quran in a way that is considered to be orthodox and non-idolatrous. So, at the very least, Muslims have a pretty good idea what they're supposed to believe in and what they're not supposed to believe in. So, we could have a look at the schism of the Buddhists. So I'm going to find out for you what was I going to say? I'm going to find out for you what the problem is with the Eastern religions. The Eastern religions have acquired no great empire. The Majapahit empire has been superseded by Islam the in in the Far East, in Malaysia and Indonesia. So we must concede that there is something about the absolutist nature of these organized religions that gives them their organizational power. But in a way, it's logical. You know, we should all sing from the same hymn sheet, and this is an expression that comes from Christianity. Obviously, you know, we should believe correctly. And even this idea of believing correctly is a source of strife, but also of strength amongst those who believe in the Abrahamic God. Why believe in the Abrahamic God? Because he is the most powerful deity conceivable. And if these three religious groups, these Jews, Christians, and Muslims, cannot decide who is the most powerful, at least they can organize themselves into three distinct groups and keep their identity in contrast to each other's beliefs. So the real distinction between the Abrahamic religions and the Eastern religions is that the Abrahamic religions claim to have the support of divine revelation, to have the benefit of divine revelation. And this is important because obviously you know whatever claim you want to make, you want to be able to support your claim. And what is more powerful than saying that God agrees with you and his scripture that you possess supports your argument? So if we dismiss the Eastern religions, we are left with the three Abrahamic religions. And I'm saying the answer is obvious, but I get so many people set on arguing with me and telling me that I have no right to tell anyone anything because I don't even believe. And it is true that I am agnostic. But I am an agnostic who is capable of entertaining the idea of a universe that was not created, and also of entertaining the idea of a universe that was the creation of the creator, known as the Abrahamic God. So obviously you would have two different modes of living if you were an atheist or an ethical monotheist. So if you were atheist, you would believe that this life is all there is, and you are not to cut it short prematurely by committing suicide, and you are to enjoy it as much as possible because YOLO, you only live once. And if you're an ethical monotheist, you would regard this life as an examination hall and designed to test your ability to tell the difference between good and evil in theory and in practice. So this is the deal. I think you can concede that atheists would be less likely to obey God's laws because A, they don't believe in God, B, they don't believe that even if he existed, he will punish them for their idolatry and blasphemy, and see they would only um, obey God's laws to, or any law to avoid punishment. But the ethical monotheists would say they want to obey the law because they believe it is God's law, and wanting to go to heaven, they would want to obey it just because it is the law of God. So you can see between these two different outlooks on life and the afterlife that one set of people is going to be the group. You will see that the atheists are less likely to obey God's laws than ethical monotheists who believe in God and the afterlife. And the difference is clear. Most people in prison are not the legitimate offspring of married parents. In fact, most of them, and it has been borne out by the crime and prison statistics, that most convicted prisoners come from the fatherless homes of unmarried mothers. So this means one kind of society is better than the other. One is more likely to engender a high trust society, and the other one a low trust society full of illegitimate offspring of unmarried mothers growing up in fatherless homes. So it should be obvious which society we would choose if we wanted to live in a high trust society. That much is clear to me, to people listening. So, what is the problem? The problem is the three religious groups, the three Abrahamic religions, not wanting to concede to the other two, when really the answer is so simple. Because the very least that these three Abrahamic religions, these adherents of these three Abrahamic religions, can agree to is that God did indeed forbid idolatry and blasphemy in his commandments. So we know that Christians know it because there are Hollywood movies, these sword and sandals movies that tell the story of Moses, and they do say that there were 10 commandments. 10 commandments that Christians know come from the Old Testament or the Torah, the first 5 books of the Pentateuch. And they would know that the first and second commandment of prohibitions against idolatry and blasphemy. So even Christians who do practice idolatry and blasphemy would not disagree about the 10 commandments, because I've seen it there carved in stone in their churches. So they can't pretend they don't know about it. And they, for a while, kept the Sabbath and closed their shops on Sundays, because that was the Christian Sabbath. And they made a point of having a different day of rest from the Jews. And in a way, it's useful. When the Jews are enjoying their holiday, the Gentiles should be, up and about and doing their things in case, there are medical emergencies and such like, because it would just be silly if everybody, were bound by the rules of the Sabbath, and for this reason, it is necessary to acknowledge that the Jews are a different group with different rules. And if they're keeping the Sabbath, Gentiles shouldn't also be keeping the Sabbath, because then the world would grind to a halt, and important essential services just wouldn't get done. So that, I think, is fair enough. So it would make sense. And it also gives people a 2-day weekend, because Gentiles decided not to copycat the Jews on their Sabbath. They were saying that their Sabbath was on Sunday, and left it to Jews to celebrate their Sabbath on their own. But over the years, Christians stopped celebrating their Sabbath and instead went shopping, which meant Christians had to work, and families probably couldn't stay together because of all those Gentiles who had to work on a Sunday. Muslims don't have a Sabbath, but they do have a kind of 5 times me time that they have through their prayers. But what I'm trying to say here is that Jews are really meant to live with Gentiles, and this is also supported by chapter 17, verse 104 of the Quran, that says that in the end times, if Jews are not already living in the promised land, they will be gathered in a commingled crowd to Israel. So even if they're not living in Israel, they'll be, plonked there, so to speak, in a commingled crowd, meaning that it wouldn't be just Jews in Israel, it would be Gentiles. So the position of Israel is that they were always meant to live with Gentiles. And this would make sense because, the whole idea of the Shabbos Goy was necessary for the Jew to function if he meant to keep the Sabbath properly. Because if there were no Shabbos Goy, then all kinds of things could become very awkward. Emergency services operating, and ambulances and police force and all that. So it's obvious that Jews are meant to keep their distinctive character, and they are also to live with Gentiles. And if they are to live with Gentiles, it would be in their interest to ensure that the Gentile is a righteous Gentile and not an unrighteous one, because the Jew needs righteous Gentiles that he can rely on to sell his chametz to on Passover. And I think we all want righteous people to be living with, and not who aren't crooks and swindlers. So this is something that suggests that Jews have a role in maintaining morality amongst Gentiles. And what is also obvious is that because Jews are punished more harshly than Gentiles for their transgressions against God's laws, they are seen to be supposedly anyway morally superior. And if they're not morally superior and they do break their commandments, then they'll get punished more harshly, such as breaking the Sabbath, which incurs a death penalty for Jews, but not for Gentiles. So if you look at scripture as a whole, you will see that Jews need Gentiles, and they can't, and they're not supposed to live in Israel on their own. And I don't think they want to, because they do need Gentile labor to do their work that they don't want to do themselves. The Jews don't have a working class, and that's why they need trustworthy Gentiles, righteous Gentiles, whose work they can trust and whose morals they do not regard as disgusting, and therefore they must obey the Noahide laws. But the problem with these Jews is that they have not been telling Gentiles about the Noahide laws. We understand from Christian history that they have not been promoting the Noahide laws as thoroughly as they could be doing, and even now they refuse, because I pointed out to these Jews again and again and again that it is a problem that they do not tell Christians that they are idolaters, and they are understandably reluctant and want to shush me. But I'm saying that if God exists, then he would be angry with Christians for being idolaters and blasphemers, and he would also be angry with Jews for not telling these Christians they are idolaters and blasphemers. And then you're going to be asking, what about the Muslims? And the Muslims have also been commanded, specifically in chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran, to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son, and they haven't been doing that. And they don't want to talk about it either. So these Muslims, I'm afraid, have been just as bad as the Jews. And if God exists, he'll be very cross with them. Thank you, 3 viewers who have turned up. Hello, Stuart Thompson. Good evening to you too. I don't know you, but good of you to come. I hope I'm making some sense. So, to finish what I'm trying to say. Okay, wait. I need to go through what I had to say, what I said earlier in a space that maybe will not be listened to because of the audio issues. So I tried to say that Chief Rabbi of Iran says Israel has nothing to do with Judaism. That's because the secular state of Israel doesn't care for religion at all. It's more interested in being an Israel of liberal Democrats. So the importance of organized religion is its greater organizational power, and this is borne out by the greater empire that Christians and Muslims have acquired. And I know somebody's going to ask about China, which is also an empire, and a very ancient one, that has been around for as long as the Jews have been around. So I guess China is a foil to Israel. I guess what I'm trying to do is to imagine how God would feel about all these people who claim to believe in him, but who only pretend to believe in him to acquire a higher moral status to those who do not. And this is all very understandable. So how can you tell a hypocrite claims to be a Jew, Christian, or Muslim, the best way of doing that is to check out his attitude towards idolatry. So we already know that Christians don't give a damn. It's because they only use Jesus as a kind of brand to show that they're not Jews or Muslim. And also it's a religion of their ancestors, so they don't want to, give that up because they would regard it as, well, a failure to have to give up their traditions. Not that they haven't given up a lot of their traditions after giving up their belief in God. I mean, marriage is the most important and eugenic human tradition. And if you give that up, you really are giving up your ability to not suffer from degeneracy. But now they've gotten into a far worse stage and pretend not to care what degeneracy is, if they even understand it at all. So, degeneracy is a problem of getting stupider and weaker and more corrupt. And obviously, if your government is getting stupider and weaker and more corrupt, you, as a taxpayer, are going to suffer higher prices, higher crime, and everything just getting worse. So it would be in your interest to choose a better moral system if you don't think your government is what you'd like. And I'm saying the way forward is very, very simple. If only you're prepared to follow logic. I see SJJ has turned up and asked what I'm talking about. Well, maybe it's too abstract for everybody. I'm just saying, organized religion has a greater power than the Eastern religions, and if you're choosing a religion, you should choose for the one with the greater organizational force. So if you're a Westerner and you have noticed that your empire is in decline, choosing Hinduism or Buddhism as your imperial religion would be, well, not the most rational choice. So I'm saying, well, you're just stuck with the three Abrahamic religions. Most of you are not Jews, so you're stuck with Christianity and Islam. And Christianity is kaput, so it's got to be Islam, right? So the problem with Jews is that they're very divided. Richard Fan was talking to them earlier, and I suppose in a way it was quite comical. So when he said he was a Noahide, he was kind of belle of the ball, and the Jewish woman was delighted with him. But when he made it clear that he wasn't a Zionist and found it uncomfortable to think of all these Gazans being exterminated and genocided, they started being mean to him and called him an idiot and accused him of building tunnels under that the Gazans are supposed to have. But what I found interesting is that none of them were rabbis. So they had this guy who, had this Hebrew accent, and he said a lot of words in Hebrew, and I suppose that was meant to be impressive. I wasn't impressed because he said, "I'm just an ordinary Jew. I'm not," and so he wasn't even a rabbi. So it meant that nothing he said made any sense. Well, okay, nothing he said would have any authority. But the thing is, even if he were a rabbi, nothing this hypothetical rabbi would say would make any difference because there is no hierarchy of rabbis. And this is what I mean about having an organized religion. And Christians are actually fortunate in that they do have an organized religion because they do have a pope who is the religious leader of the Catholics, and the Anglicans have their official religious leader who is the Archbishop of Canterbury, and actually the British monarch is also the head of the Church of England. So really, he's hiring somebody to do his job that he knows he's not really supposed to do, and actually, is a problem with doing this because it's a separation of powers problem. So if you know anything about the Hasmonean dynasty of the Jews, they got into trouble because the king and the priest are not supposed to be the same person. And for reasons too complicated for me to explain, there was a time when the king and priest of the Hasmonean dynasty were one and the same person. And in a way, I think you can understand why this might be a problem because, the whole idea of a king having a priest is that, the priest kind of restrains him and, tells him when to go to war or not go to war and be kinder or be more ruthless or whatever. So what happens is that the priest must at least be another person, not the king. And this the Hasmoneans ignored, and they crashed and burnt. And this is also a problem with the with the British monarchy, because if you know anything about the English Reformation, you will know that a chap called Thomas Cranmer, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury during the time of Henry VIII, got into trouble when Henry's daughter Mary came to the throne. Henry was an Anglican. He broke with Rome and created his own religion called Anglicanism or the Church of England. But his daughter Mary, the only daughter of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, was a staunch Catholic, and she wanted to return England back to Catholicism. And therefore, anyone who claimed to be Anglican would have to be burned at the stake, because the rule was whatever was the religion of the king, that would have to be the religion of his subjects, and this rule was strictly observed. I mean, obviously, you can't, if you're saying that you're a king and you enjoy divine right protected by the church, you can't have all your subjects saying, well, we're not even Christian. In fact, we're Muslim and we don't agree with your way of doing things, and we will invoke the curses of Allah on the British Crown, for example. So in the olden days, before the American Revolution, that was certainly not allowed, and anybody thinking of becoming a different religion to their king would be denounced as heretics and burnt at the stake, and that was how Christianity was enforced. And I wish people would understand instead of pretending not to understand, because it's very important for you to understand why Christianity has been rejected by so many revolutions, such as the American, French, and Russian revolutions, and also rejected by the monarchs of Europe, because what was the Reformation but the rebellion of these kings who basically told the Pope to go jump in the lake? That was what it was all about, because Bossy Boots Pope was being a bit too in your face, in the faces of the European monarchs, to be able to make himself bearable to them, and eventually they rebelled. And you know what, you can see why Henry had decided he'd had enough when he said, well, I haven't got a son, I'm not going to leave my kingdom to a daughter, and I need to have my marriage annulled if I can't take another wife. And at the time, Christianity was very, very strict about monogamy, to the extent that not even kings could have more than one wife. And if they wanted to marry again, they would have to annul their marriages. And this is what they would have to do. They would have to go to the Pope and get the Pope to declare that their marriage was null and void, and they should be treated as never having even been married. But this obviously caused a great deal of awkwardness if the king, in fact, married his wife and then went on to sire children with her. I mean, a legitimate question is that if you marry and have children, and then you get an annulment from the Pope, what does it mean for your children? Are they bastards? And there was this yes and no answer from the Catholic Church, which said that any children that was born through the marriage would not be declared illegitimate, which was kind of them, but it still doesn't make any sense. So do you see what a mess Christianity has been for so many centuries? And it was only a matter of time before the whole belief system collapsed, and it has. So it collapsed it has been collapsing, but it really utterly failed the Protestant monarchs of Europe when, in the year 1918, after a very bad war, the Kaiser of Austria and Germany had to abdicate because, well, I guess if they didn't abdicate, their subjects would soon be sorting them out in a not very nice way, and possibly in the way that the Russians sorted out their Tsar in a very, what's the word? Well, I suppose you could call it mass murder, the extermination of the entire Russian royal family, the Romanovs. So it's a little frustrating that nobody has noticed. This might be a problem of the power of the English language, the power of the Western media, and the power of the British monarchy. So you can understand that the British, being a monarchy, would want to keep their monarchy. So they're not going to be the ones saying, ooh, let's get rid of the British crown. And also, it's very useful to the Americans. And you may have noticed, those of you who watched The Crown, it wasn't made by British money, but by American money, because The Crown was made by Netflix with British locations and actors, of course, but it was still made by American money. And I don't think that the lefties at the BBC would have wanted to spend all that money making the Crown look so nice in their, actual locations and everything. So monarchy can be very useful if you want to control the people. So the point I've been trying to make to all these Australians, Canadians, and New Zealanders is that they're still British, but a lot of them still think that they live in a country that has an independent foreign policy, when in fact they are a vassal state of a vassal state. And this goes to British identity, white identity. It's people not knowing who they're really supposed to be, or even know what they ought to be. So, back to the problem of people not knowing who they are. Let's say you completely forgot about who your parents were, who your community is, and you're only left with your reason. I think you could find your way back to reason and identity if you choose to use your reason to choose the best available religion. And I'm saying it's not Judaism. Even if you're Jewish, it's not Judaism, because what Judaism does is punish you very harshly for breaking the Sabbath, and then for everybody thinking you're a hypocrite because you're not even a believing Jew. And so the problem is how we're. And so the problem is one of identity. We need to know who we are, and it's very awkward if we don't, if we're orphaned from our parents and our community. But if we have indeed forgotten who we are, we can work out what we ought to do if we want a religion, because it is religion that gives us our identity and our story and our principles. And this is so important that the lack of it has caused so much confusion and distress in the West, to the extent that they don't even know, that Westerners don't even know that the most important function of religion is to promote the practice of marriage, which is a eugenic practice. So I will address the question, or the statement by Stuart Thompson, who says monarchy is the basis political institution, and its origins lie in the priesthood. In most monarchies, a king was either divine or had priestly functions. Okay, so I'm saying that the monarchy, okay, the monarch is a kind of divine human being, or at the very least very powerful, and I think people like the idea. They like the idea of having a king, maybe because a king is almost semi-divine, and that's what people like. The mysticism and the magic and the mumbo jumbo, and the a republic is just too prosaic for them, because they don't like the idea of other men who are not members of the royal family being able to rise to the top on merit alone. That they just want all this mumbo jumbo, and this, I think, is one of the problems of religion. A lot of people like mumbo jumbo, and I think it's unnecessary, because you can actually deduce that God exists, if you were minded to do so, by inferring that if there was a creation, there must have been a creator. And there you go, bang, you've got God. But people want all this mumbo jumbo because they find it a bit bald, I suppose. They want stories and mystery, and and then argue with each other over the meaning of these mysteries. And I'm saying, when Jews and Muslims talk, they talk about eschatology and the identity of the Messiah, and I'm saying there's no need, because all you need to decide is which set of laws you should follow. And I'm saying it's not that hard. If you're agnostic, you're just going to choose the least restrictive set of laws suitable for your group. And you're Gentile, so why would you be choosing Judaism? Only the most Islamophobic Gentile would convert to Judaism and convert to a religion that is so hard that half the Jews in existence have given up on it. So there's something hugely illogical about the whole thing, and people are obviously not thinking correctly, and I just don't know what to do about it. But for the moment, I will finish this stream. Thank you for your attention.